Welcome to the Consciousness Anywhere and Everywhere podcast. I am Shannon O'Hara, and I invite you to a completely new world of possibilities. Welcome, everybody, to the Consciousness Anywhere podcast. I am your host on this magical journey, Shannon O'Hara, and if you are tuning in, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're going to see I'm joined by a special guest.
Also in blue. My name's Max.
And we went with a blue theme for you guys today, so we would match. This was intentional. If you're not watching on YouTube, if you're listening on an audio platform, come check out our blue. Come to YouTube, look for @Shannon O'Hara, and you can watch the podcasts. Sometimes the podcasts are just audio, but they will always be on YouTube too, with a stable graphic. So we are on a relationship journey with all of you beautiful people who are looking for greater relationships. And Max and I are working our way towards, by the time you listen to this, hosting a Relationship 101 class.
Which is basically what we're doing is talking about this, creating an energy, touching into different points of a relationship to see what's relevant and where we want to come from with this relationship class, because it's not about getting relationship right. It's not about doing relationship in a specific way. What we really desire is to open up the questions for you to ask yourself, like what works for you? What is relationship for you? But then also give some inspiration and tools for how to achieve that. And
we're talking about love relationships or intimate partner relationships, just to be clear, because obviously relationship is huge. When Max first brought up the topic to do a relationship class, I was like, yeah, but like what kind of relationship class? Like you have a relationship with everybody that you know. So obviously we're keeping this conversation to love relationships. And if you're starting off with this one, we really recommend going back and listening to the first relationship-themed podcast that we're doing in this series called Relationship Opener.
That's interesting. What happened in that podcast, I wonder?
It was good.
And today we're going to do some frequently asked questions, like the sort of relationship questions that come up for people, men and women, but you can do this in any configuration. There might be in a gay relationship two men. One might be the more feminine partner and might function more like the woman, or not.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of configurations. We're not trying to reduce this down to anything, but so take it with a grain of salt and then see where it applies. Sometimes it might not apply.
Well, and I think really we need to start off with this. I need to really clear the runway here for everybody has points of view about relationship, and everybody has points of view about your relationship. And how many points of view do you have about what your relationship should be or shouldn't be? Max and I are coming from a long-term committed marriage. We're probably not going to teach in the Relationship 101 class, like how to get into a relationship, although we absolutely can talk about how your points of view, how your energies, how your attitudes, how your belief systems, how your thoughts impact what kind of relationships you invite into your life. And one of the things that my dad taught me really early on that I am infinitely grateful for and only really beginning to really understand as a 45-year-old female is that relationships have to be created.
Yeah.
I remember him telling me this as a teenager, and I didn't really get it until, you get it when you get it. And what he would say is most people get into a relationship and then that's it. They no longer create. They think that getting their relationship is the achievement. And then what essentially occurs is that a lot of relationships just go on maintenance. And then, is that fun?
If you look around, you'll probably find that it's not.
So if you would like something bigger, something greater, you have to create it.
And the thing that happens with maintenance mode, there is no such thing as maintenance when it comes to relationship. You're either creating the relationship, it's growing into something, or it's deteriorating and dying towards whatever breakup, or where it gets the most dysfunctional.
Yeah, just two people becoming less and less present.
There's only two methods, really.
How do you know
I'll
that? Talk
suggest.
about that.
Well, it's like how the body functions too. Your body is either building, like it's in an anabolic state, or it's in a catabolic state where it's deteriorating. There is like bodies don't maintain. So this, with creation, things are either being created or they're deteriorating. And it might be very slight in either direction. But my sense is like maintenance is like a concept. It's a definition.
It's a fiction that's unnatural in nature.
Exactly.
Like
so if you look at
nothing in
nature, there is no such thing as maintenance. Everything's either creating or like transitioning.
Nature really
constantly.
only creates. That's even when it looks like it's destroying, it's creating, which
is really just transitioning, like into something new and different.
And so if we can bring the wisdom of nature into our relationships, even if the relationship doesn't look right or looks like you're going through a, deteriorative process or erosive or destructuring or destructive process, is that part of creating? Can that lead to a creation in the future? Now, what determines if that leads to a creation in the future, I posit that it's the two people in the relationship that will work through and either create together into something new and different, or not, and essentially never get over separation that could potentially lead to either you two separating or you separating from yourself.
Totally.
Or both.
So it's choice creates, essentially. And both people need to choose. It's not a togetherness thing, except where it is a togetherness thing. Fundamentally, it's like an individual choice and, what's your point of view? Like a questioning and an exploration. And then it's about creating together.
Yeah, I think the first 10 minutes of this podcast are actually like our relationship ethos philosophy lecture. Because I also think we must state that the quality of the relationships that you have begins with the relationship you have with yourself.
Yeah, you'll hear us repeat this often.
And if you are looking for a relationship to fix you, to heal you, to replace you.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm missing there's other things that people do. Like if you're not present, if you don't want to participate in your life, if you don't like yourself, we want other people to make us feel better.
Or if you don't want to choose, which like feeds into all of the things you're saying as well.
Like what kind of a relationship that starts from that place, where can that go? Eventually, if your love relationships or intimate partner relationships are going to work, you have to participate and be present and maybe like yourself as the prerequisite, which I would say that doesn't always have to be the prerequisite, because I know there was a lot of parts of me that I judged super heavily before we got together and in the beginning. And still, I am constantly working on getting over judgments that I use to keep you out and to not receive the gift of you in my life.
So let's get into some of these FAQs that we're talking about in this podcast. Some of them might bring up some stuff for you.
Yeah.
I would recommend using some of the tools like the Access Consciousness Clearing Statement. Everything that brings up and everything that is, will you destroy and uncreate it all? Right and wrong, good and bad, pod and poc, all 100 shorts, boys, perverts, bases, creations, and beyonds. It's like a vacuum cleaner to take all of the funky energy that comes up and moves it out of the way so you can get to more of what's true for you.
That was the Access Consciousness Clearing Statement. If that sounded like gobbledygook to you, awesome. I'm glad you're hearing it for the first time. We will link below a video that will go in depth explaining it to you, that actually my amazing husband has edited, which is, I think it's so cool. But you want to make sure to tuck in, get a good drink, make sure you have some space, because it's a pretty honker video.
Yeah,
it's pretty long.
35 minutes long. It's with Dr. Dane here.
Because you need that much time to explain that gobbledygook thing. That's why we're not talking about it more right now.
Yeah, theclearingstatement.com is where you find it. It'll be linked below. So what's our first FAQ?
So we're like, okay, well, what do we think are the real, the questions that people ask in relationship that maybe they might not admit to themselves, but so we have them broken down into his and hers, so the first one is her questions. How do I get him to do what I want?
I think these are so funny.
I think we need to be practical about why women are going to be wanting to, work on their relationships. Like, let's face it, like, ladies, how much do you look at when you're creating a relationship? Does that mean getting him doing what you want? No judgment. And we're going to talk extensively around that question. How do you get him to do what you want? We're going to talk about the point of view of the question, but then also what is the creative flow in a thing like that?
And the first thing I would want to add to that too, like in any of these questions, is who does this belong to? Like if you notice that there is a point of view, like one of these questions in your life that's prevalent and it's just not working, like how do I get him to do what I want? Because it's not a workable question. Look at where you got that from.
Talk about how it's not a workable question.
Well, it doesn't actually work. If you're projecting and expecting, which is what this point of view is, towards anybody, whether it's a man or somebody else, all they can really do is like defend against it or resist against it.
Or submit totally and just do what you want and exclude themselves or stop being the leader of their own lives or the chooser of their own lives.
Yeah, so do you actually want somebody to submit to you and like give themselves up totally? Or do you want to control them? Or like, where is that point of view coming from? But like I said beforehand, firstly, who does it actually belong to? Where did you buy that point of view? Where did that point of view come from initially?
Where did that point of view come from initially? Which segues into a question we do not have written down, which isn't really a question, but it's more of a reality of how much are you being one or both of your parents? I guess that is a question. How much are you being one or both of your parents in your love relationships?
Totally. I noticed that two different points in my life. When I got into a relationship, like parts of my parents that I took on. And then when I had kids, the amount of things about my parents' dynamics and stuff that I took on to be a parent, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Just like this automatic thing. And that's something that happens very commonly for people.
Like in a perfect world, we would learn from our parents and our parents would be empowering, be kind, be generous, be open, be allowing. And I don't know, have you found that perfect world anywhere? Because I'm still looking for it and I haven't quite found it.
Ah, that's funny. Well, there is no automatic perfect world. And the thing that you said about were your parents empowering is this question of how do I get someone to do what I want?
How do I get him to do what I want? Is that empowering?
Is it empowering of you? Is it empowering of them? Is it empowering of like the creation of the relationship?
And is how do I get him to do what I want? Like who are you being when you're doing that? Now so there's nothing wrong with that question. How do I get him to do what I want? But let's evolve it.
Yeah.
So what if you were giving advice to a woman about this thing where she really wants her man to do, or she's super controlling, she really wants, because I've never done that. Like I don't think you're giving me the advice, but because you're giving the public the advice. It's not about giving me advice at all. Like
just in case she's being sarcastic.
He's not giving me advice. He's giving you advice. So if you were theoretically giving a hypothetical woman advice about this question, like what would a different question be that could create with a man?
That is so funny. I just want to clarify too, like Shannon has asked this question of herself intensively and then asked me as well, like from the man's perspective. So she is totally joking right now.
If you were working with a woman who was really fixated on, let's face it, this is a controlling question. How do I get anybody to do what you want? That's like, how do I control the situation? Actually, I kind of want to make some caveats there because how do I get him to do what I want? You might think it's coming from a benevolent or right place.
Well, interestingly, how you ask the question makes a huge difference. Like the point of view where you come from when you're asking that question. That question isn't, like you said, not an inherently bad question. If you are doing it to control or, have greater control over them, it doesn't really work. But if you are doing it from a question of inclusion, like you're including them and their point of view and where they're coming from, and you're including you, it's a very different energy.
And I would add, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. And what do you desire to create? Because if it's what you want, what I found in this relationship, because Shannon, for those who don't know her very well, she's a very creative person. And what I found over the 11 years that we've been married is that she's always choosing for greater, which actually includes me first and foremost, but it includes other people. It's not just her point of view and for her and like exclusive.
Sometimes you're so sweet. Max is so sweet. Sometimes it is that. Sometimes it is that, okay. and a lot of times it isn't.
Sure,
but how I got to it being an inclusive, how I got to be a recovering control freak who is inclusive, because I saw how me getting what I want the way I wanted was damaging to this relationship.
Right.
I did have to identify like the way I wanted things to work wasn't always what created greater for both of us. So what I started asking was, first I had to identify, okay, am I being controlling? Do I want him to do this in a particular way? Be honest with myself. And then I would ask myself, okay, so what's my intention with this? And I think that's the real key. And the bang for your buck is if you can get clear on why you're behaving in a certain way. Because a lot of times I would be like, I want you to do it this way, or why won't he do it this way, or how do I get him to, do what I want? A lot of that was coming from this place of, I thought that if it didn't happen in a certain way, if things wouldn't work, everything would fall apart. Right.
Which is automatically an exclusion of the other person and what they can contribute and how they can contribute it.
Well, it's
basically,
and I mean, what a control freak point of view. How many of you people out there can relate to this? I'll do it myself because no one else does it no one does it as good as me.
No one else is gonna do it right.
But if you bring that point of view into a relationship, what does that lead to?
Yeah, it leads to an exclusion of the other person and what they can contribute, and which is less possibility. If both of you have the capability of contributing, then it's a matter of cooperation, not of control. Okay.
And I was not raised by it's like my mom wasn't really a great example of cooperation. Sorry, Mom, if you're listening to this. And my mom was very controlling and very opinionated and would use a lot of anger to get her way. And I adopted that and brought that into this relationship. And really, within the first few years, realized that if I continue to behave like that, I was going to destroy my relationship and drive Max away. So that's where I had to stop being my mom and start being me and looking at, okay, so if do I really desire to create this relationship? Or do I just want to be right? Mm-hmm. I think that's a really big one for people,
Yep.
How many of you guys have done this thing where you push away or you have an argument or you create separation with someone who you really care about just so that you're right? And what happens when you're right? The other person has to be wrong. Do you want to be in a relationship with someone who's wrong all the time?
Or vice versa, with someone that's right all of the time.
Or with someone who's right all the time.
Yeah.
So what is the intention behind, how do I get him to do what I want? What are you actually intending with that?
Which is, my version of the question was, what do you desire to create? So that's like a question that you have to ask individually for you and do some exploration on. Because Shannon is an incredible leader and she has led a lot of things in our life that has been a contribution to like everything growing. But if I make her the source of everything and if I like give up who I am, what I can contribute, and what my point of view is on things, then that also doesn't work. So we both lead in different areas and in different ways, and then we both follow in different areas in different ways. And that's like something to learn. It's not necessarily easy.
Especially since if you didn't grow up in a household with cooperative parents who were cooperating together, which we didn't.
Yeah, absolutely not.
We didn't.
Yeah.
And you might have, and if you did, consider your life like a blessing and consider your parents like an anomaly.
Totally.
Unfortunately, statistically, most of us grow up with either a single parent or if there are two parents, those two parents may or may not, number one, like themselves, like one another, or be cooperating.
Or were ever had parents or people in their lives that showed them how to cooperate with others.
So that's where we're starting from with this. Like it's sort of like, you're not wrong, but what kind of relationship model were you exposed to? Kind of a thing. So that's why we're really doing these classes too. I think I just realized
to change reality.
Yeah. Because you and I have been so gifted by a huge amount of support and coaching and facilitation by my dad, who's the founder of Access Consciousness.
And then a bunch of other people in our lives too that would contribute to like these different perspectives and ways. And
always at the core was our desire to have greater
yeah,
for ourselves and together if it was possible.
yeah, totally.
So that's the first female question. Should we switch to a man's question now?
What do we have?
The first one was, how do I get peace?
Yeah. So how many men can relate to like getting nagged, and like, how do I get some peace in my life when I'm in this relationship with this woman? And like I said, you can adapt this to like any sort of configuration of relationship, man, woman, otherwise. So what if there was nothing wrong? What if you could have total allowance for you in being annoyed, being frustrated, not wanting to nag, whatever that is, an allowance for the woman or the other partner of like their point of view? What if everything was just an interesting point of view? It didn't mean anything. It didn't have to be significant. That's where I would start off with like creating some space, creating some like outside, a bigger point of view, like essentially.
Get out of reaction.
Yeah. So if you got out of reaction through that process, what's actually required? What energy does the partner require? Are they in reaction? Do they have a point of view of where they're coming from? Or did you perhaps not keep your word on something that you said you would do? Because as a man, from my perspective, and you have to look at what your perspective is on this, is one of your greatest gifts is keeping your word. And this is something that I've had to learn a lot. And Gary Douglas, the founder of Access Consciousness, Shannon's stepfather, who we mentioned beforehand, who's helped us a lot in our relationship, especially in the first years, in actually like getting it to work, and has been this huge, incredible role model for keeping his word. Because even if he doesn't want to, even if it's like, he will still keep his word, because that's one of the fundamental elements of who he is. And as a man, for me, if I don't keep my word, how do I trust myself? Right? And to be trustable for yourself is one of, I would say, a priority to being able to be in a relationship where you can be you. Because if you don't trust yourself, then you tend to go into all of these sneaky, weird things and trying to get away with stuff, being a child essentially. And from that point of view, you can't create a relationship with another, like in an empowering sense.
Yeah.
If anything, it would be needy. It would be like,
will you turn the woman into your mom?
Yeah, totally. Exactly. So those are the different things I would ask myself, is like, okay, what's creating this? What's creating this reaction in me? What's creating this reaction in her? But not so much in trying to figure it out, but just looking at the energy of what's required here. Because also women, sometimes they will give you needs that you can fulfill. And you do those and you're like, oh, I'm successful, I can fulfill her need. And then they will also give you needs that you cannot fulfill. Okay, this is something that Dr. Dane here, the co-creator of Access Consciousness, mentioned in a class recently, and I was just really like,
it was mind-blowing for me too, actually. It
was like,
information
holy shit,
I really
that
needed.
Is so fucking true. And then like we applied it to our relationship and
had so much progress.
In just acknowledging stuff. Like when it was like Shannon would like get really like into something, and then I would ask her, is this like a need that I cannot fulfill for you? And because of her openness and willingness to go there, was like, we ended up laughing because, and this is a number of times, because it was actually true.
Yeah, and I really had to know that I was inventing a need that he couldn't fulfill, because I was using it sneakily in my world to justify not letting Max in, not having sex, not being close. I'd always be like, this is weird, I feel weird, da 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 da, I don't know what's going on. And then finally Max was like, well, is this a need? Are you inventing a need I can't fulfill? And it was like, the light bulb went on, and I completely changed for me.
Totally. So there's these different elements, basically, but you need to include yourself, and what if you didn't come from wrongness? And what if you didn't come from rightness? Like, what if she isn't right for nagging, because traditionally that's the point of view, well, she's trying to be right and you're wrong as a man. And what if you weren't wrong as a man? Because then when you go beyond judgment, right and wrong, then you get to actually look at what is and find out what's true, which makes things so much fucking easier.
One of the things about this question, like, how do I get peace as a man? Ladies, I don't know if you know this, but a lot of men are like trying to figure out how to not deal with your shit. And there's a guy named David Data who I love, and who I know you, Max, you did like a lot of his stuff like way before you found Access and stuff. And I'm gonna link him below. I'm gonna link, I guess, his website. I haven't looked at his stuff in a long time, so I don't really know. I'll link some places where you can connect to him. He's written several books, or actually more than several, but the one I would say is really like
the one that he's most known for
is The Way of the Superior Man, which I read, which really changed my whole perspective on like the quality of man that I was like looking for, and that I had never given myself permission to like. It really appeased a lot of conflict. Sorry, that's a sidebar. The point of this David Data thing is, I remember listening to one of his lectures, or I was reading it in his book, one of his books or something, and he talks about, or maybe it was in the course that we did. We did one of his courses. I didn't really like it that much, if I'm honest. I really prefer like the books and stuff. But anyways, he said, he was talking to men or something, and he's like, men have two choices. You can either like get into the fray of, cohabitation and women, and like there is a fray in that, or you can be a priest. Like, right? You can either be a renunciant, be a recluse, not engage in relationships with sexy time women or men or whatever, like engage in whatever dynamic your relationship gender thing is. Or like I think the point was there's no way of escaping it. It's like you're either going to commit to that or not. Or you're either going to commit to the fun and the fray. The
tussle,
essentially. Oh, yes, that's what I think he calls it, the tussle, that being with women is, or...
Well, being in a relationship, it's like this...
Just be a monk.
It's a tussle. It's this fluid, like constant creative environment. Just like when you look at nature, it's constantly tussling in creation. That's essentially what occurs in a relationship as well. And you can either have ease and peace with that, even if it is chaos, or you can have like this reactionary, avoiding, hard, difficult time where you just want to get away from it the whole time.
Mm. Yeah. Well, or it's like you can do what my dad did, which is I was raised by, I have two dads, but I was raised by my stepdad, and he was married before my mom, and then he married my mom when I was 4, raised me, divorced my mom. They got a divorce when I was like 20, 21 or something. But that was kind of it for him. Like, he didn't get into another relationship with a woman after that. And I talked to him a lot about that actually like a few years back, and he was just like, yeah, I was really clear in my world, like that wasn't a direction, like that wouldn't lead to the kind of world I wanted to live in. And he wasn't doing it like women are bad or like relationships are bad at all. It was this very clean, clear choice that he was making for him in his own world. And he knew that his target, his mission, his direction in life would not be served by being in a relationship or being married. I mean, he actually is in a relationship, but it's not the kind of traditional relationship, male-female, copulation, cohabitation, although they do cohabitate, but he has a really close companion that works with us in Access, and it's a completely... It's
a creation thing. It's always about creating more with the business and with...
a monogamous, not a monogamous procreation relationship, but we don't procreate, so it's not a monogamous copulatory relationship.
It's not a sex relationship.
Yeah,
basically. So
that was the how do I find peace from the male perspective, how do I get peace.
What's the second female one that we have? How do you change him?
How do you change your man? The $1 million question, ladies. If you want to change the man that you're in relationship with, do you like him? So this was a big one that I've worked through over the years, and I would notice I'd come to these points where like I wanted Max to change. And I had to look at, okay, so do I want Max to change for greater? And if he doesn't change, will this work? And so I think too oftentimes, like, change can be generative and it can be weaponized in relationships. Knowing when change is required is relevant and important because we do change as people. And sometimes we are functioning from a particular point of view or energy or attitude or whatever that doesn't work in life, let alone in relationships. And if we don't change that stuff, it could potentially lead to the diminishment of the relationship or diminishment period. So there's change, like, let's perceive like change like in a vacuum, like the function of change, the fact that we change, and that change isn't wrong or bad. And then there's using change as the weapon, which is like, how do I get him to change what I don't like about him? And you have to look at, are you looking for the other person to change because you don't like them like they are? Because you don't like them like they are, right? Judgment. You don't like them like they are. And like, newsflash, like a lot of people get in relationships with people they don't like. That's like a funny thing that I didn't even realize was a thing until I became an adult and I learned I got to know a lot more people and have way more life experiences, and I realized that like there was a lot of people in relationships with people they really didn't like, which, newsflash, like if you're going to get into a relationship, you might want to actually look at if you like the person, because there's another statistic where people say that they'd rather be in a relationship, they'd rather be in a bad relationship than no relationship.
Which is an avoidance thing, essentially. Like they're avoiding their life. They're avoiding creating their life and choosing their life with a relationship. And people do it in all sorts of ways. Relationship is one of those ways.
Yeah, so if you want to change somebody in a relationship, or if you want to change the man you're with, you've got to look at like, do you want to change them because you don't like them? I think it's funny.
Or they're not right enough, or they're wrong in some way.
Yeah, like, they don't fit into your picture. They don't match. They don't tick all the boxes. You know, they don't seem right. They don't seem like it's not the right man to like get the approval of your parents or your friends, right? So you got to really question your changing motivation, because there's also a generative form of change, which is recognizing and really actually caring about the person. Okay, if this person doesn't change this, like they're going to destroy themselves. And that's recognizing where change is required. But then in a relationship, you have to look at, can this person change this? And that's a lot of times missing.
Do they want to?
And do they want to? And if
because some people can, but they don't want to.
Yeah, and then comes the next question, which is, if they don't change this, does this work for me?
Yeah. Do you want this relationship if this person never changes this thing or changes, period? That's a real key telltale, because it gives you a sense of like, if you're doing a fantasy or an expectation or a projection for the relationship, rather than you're grateful for the relationship as it is and you're also happy for it to change. Like, that's a different perspective.
And recognizing, I suppose, that relationships are like long-term investments, from my perspective. You might pick a bad stock up front, and you might pick a stock that no one else believes in, but you believe in, and investing your time, your energy, your life, your choices in that person will give you information in the future. Sometimes we have to get to know somebody. We have to let energies and experiences evolve us to look at, okay, so is this person worth the time, the energy, my presence? Will this relationship mature into something of value for me? And it's recognizing that you cannot always predict the outcome of relationships. In fact, I don't even think that that's what's really relevant. What is relevant is recognizing that the people that you do choose to be in relationship with is somebody you are investing value in. Are they worth it? Is this person worth my energy, my presence?
And that's not a question to ask from reaction or from trying to get it right or anything like that.
Are they worth it? It's not that. It's more like, okay, is this person actually receiving the contribution? Do we desire? Are we targeting a similar area?
Yeah. will this contribute too? Like will this choice contribute? Could be another question that you ask around that.
Because if you're in a relationship with someone who wants to change you, or that you always feel like you need to change, that is going to be such an energy sinkhole.
For both of you.
For both of you. And like, if you're with somebody who wants kids, but you don't want kids, but like you're trying to change them to not want kids too, like, does that work? So, bigger questions.
I reckon in the next podcast, we'll talk about the 5 elements of intimacy in relationship. Because when you mentioned does this work, is like honoring is one of those 5 elements of intimacy. And I'd love to delve more into those because they're so relevant in getting more perspective about what you would like to create and what's valuable, what's relevant. And only if you have those 5 elements in a relationship can it actually be a great relationship, is something that Gary Douglas says. And
something that, I would say I've experienced.
Totally, I've experienced it as well.
Well, now that you've said it, maybe we should share a little bit of that.
Well,
the 5 elements of intimacy are?
Yes, and I would really like to delve more into these into the next podcast. So they are vulnerability, honor, allowance, gratitude, and trust. As a taste, right?
Yeah.
And as another side note, this is not about what you have in the relationship. It's something that you need to have for you first and with you first before you can even apply it in a relationship. But even if you are in a relationship already and this is the first time you hear them and you're like, holy shit, it's like not too late. Like at any stage, you can ask to have more of these in your life.
Yeah, and if those 5 elements of intimacy become the backbone of the relationship, I mean, that's really the target. That's really where I keep those. The 5 elements are really my true north. Like if I'm in conflict around the relationship or something's not easy, or we're working through something that's difficult, because that is part of relationship, is working through things. I use those 5 elements of intimacy to like bring me back into the energy that usually creates the reality that I want to experience.
Yeah.
So huge topic, hugely helpful when applied.
Cool. Let's take the
last man's question.
Why won't she just ... Huh. Right? Any expectation or projection in that? I wonder if you guys can relate to this. Because it's this, well, probably is it more of a man thing or do the women do that too? I guess why won't he just?
I think it sounds a little bit like, how do I get him to change, or how do I get him to do what I want?
Well, let's talk about it from the quote unquote male perspective. Like when you just want her to stop nagging, when you just want her to like chill out, or when you want just her to like whatever. This does tie a little bit into the previous question of like, how does the man get peace? What if you didn't have to withdraw from the energy? What if you could receive the energy, whatever it is? Okay? If it's intense, if it's annoying, if it's whatever it is, what if you're willing to receive the energy first and foremost and not withdraw or barrier? Okay? Men are commonly known to like tend to withdraw, like into the man cave, into themselves. But what if you didn't have to? Because women notice that, and the more they notice that withdrawal, the more they try and push energy into create a connection. Okay? Like I said, this could be 2 men together with that kind of dynamic. So lowering your walls and barriers, allowing the energy in, and asking a question is usually, because that allows the connection to occur, that usually allows a shift in energy there. So what if you ask the question like, or acknowledge something like, I'm sorry, honey, I wasn't being present with you. What is it that I can be or do for you? What is it that you require from me right now? And if you require space or peace or to be away, ask for that as well. For example, if she gives you like what her request is, honey, I'm going to need 10 minutes, or I'm going to need an hour, or I'm going to need a day. I'm going to need that time to process this, and then I'll come back to you with more clarity or the next steps. Okay? So there's this clarity and keeping your word and giving them information so they know what's going on. Because withdrawal and barriers is like this withdrawal of information and connection which tends to freak women out, because when the connection's not there, they're left on their own. So when you allow that connection to be there, even if you're not clear or know what to do with something, or you don't know what your point of view or reality is around something, it allows things to move and allows you to create that space that you require to know what's true.
Yeah, and it makes it a lot easier for me, personally speaking, when you do say, okay, I hear you. I hear you. I don't have an answer right now. If you give me 30 minutes a day, whatever, what has occurred in our relationship is in the beginning, I didn't trust that you would honor your word, but over time you have shown up when you said you would, and you have delivered what you said you could and would. And so I've learned that now when you tell me you need space with something, it is really easy for me to give you that space because I know it's part of the process of creation.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And then, for example, if you're in a reaction to something, you could just say like, I'm in so much reaction to this around this right now. Please give me 10 minutes just to like change this, and then we can talk more about it. Like I've had to do that a number of times too, because Shannon will either bring something up or there'll be something up in the relationship and I'll be like fucking fuming and just want to like be angry and upset and all this sort of stuff. And just acknowledging that is a huge difference, because then you can go be in reactive but you can't deal with anything from that place.
Yeah, and recognizing when you guys need to take a break. And if the man says, or I guess this goes both directions, but in this context, how we're talking about it, if he says he needs some space, and you keep nagging or keep pushing, you have to look at like, am I honoring him? Am I honoring me? Am I being practical in what it actually takes to like work through things? And if I wasn't in reaction, if this was actually a process of growth, sometimes uncomfortable, maybe beautiful sometimes, maybe uncomfortable other times.
And remember that allowance is one of those 5 elements of intimacy. So if you're willing to have allowance for you and you're willing to have allowance for them, it's huge. And you can create so much more closeness and possibility.
Yeah, closeness. I was having like a massive awareness this morning. No, I know what I was watching YouTube. We have a gym in our house. It's like, oh, it's epic. And we have a TV in there, and sometimes we put on like YouTube music. Like in the morning, like I'll put on like a YouTube like music or whatever when I'm in there. And I found this one, like these DJs that were playing in Burning Man, and like the video was ridiculous. But there was this one, I tried to like get into it for 10 minutes, but I changed it. But there was this one line in the song that they had, which was like, I'm learning to love again with you. And it really hit me. And I was like, whoa, like I realized that I was learning how to love more, to be more open, to receive more, to be, to be loved with you over time. And in the beginning, I was there for years, I would say. I was really defensive and really aggressive and really always protecting myself and making sure that like I shut you down before you could shut me down, and, you know, being right so that, you know, I'm not wrong, and like always ready to leave at a moment's notice. And you're like the opposite of ready to leave at a moment's notice.
Well, yeah, the first few years was really interesting for us, because for me, like I really valued Shannon, and like from the very beginning, she like contributed so much to like even just the questions she was asking me. And I was like, wow, this is like what I've been asking for in a person. And then there was a lot of difficult stuff too, like what you're mentioning. And I was so unclear in my world and so like just lost in my life. So we both had like these particular things that were not necessarily conducive to like an easy relationship, but we had to get to work on a lot of stuff, and piece by piece, with a lot of help, to, I got to have like more awareness and actually have the allowance and live and continue to choose like more of those 5 elements of intimacy, because it's like you're never there. There's not a place to get to. It's a continuous choice. Like that time when you're really fucking reactive and you just want to like storm out and leave and take your marbles and go home. Like that's where the rubber hits the road. Like, are you willing to have allowance for you and them in that place? And that's really where you get to build more, I would say.
It's beautiful. Build more. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
think that might be it for this podcast.
Yeah, so I guess we're going to do one more because Max said about the 5 elements of intimacy and relationship, which I love. And if this conversation, if these energies, if this is of interest, like this feels like something that you need, that you want, that you're looking for in life, please, please, please join us for the Relationship 101 class. Men, women alike, we will be getting to work and making our lives greater and better.
And feel free to ask any questions in those classes too. That's really the whole point of those questions, is those people that come, they create this class with the questions, the possibilities, the energy that they bring. So it's a co-creation with all of us. It's not going to be it's definitely not a one-way situation.
It's not a one-way situation, and relationship is not a one-size-fits-all situation. Let's leave this actually on one note, which is I tried to say this as much as I can, because if I had gotten this advice, if I had really heard it and then understood it a long time ago, I would have made my life a lot easier, which is that no two relationships are alike. Two people create a completely unique constellation, and there is no one-size-fits-all relationship, period. So really, we're in this to get everybody into what kind of relationship works for them.
Yeah, and not is right for you, but works for you. Because there is no such thing as a right relationship either.
There is no such thing as a right relationship, and what do you want your life to be? And can a relationship contribute to that? Or I'm going to be perfectly honest, I think getting a relationship to be great and create is a form of astrophysics that today I really enjoy.
And how does it get even better?
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this show. My target is to make consciousness easy to find and choose. So if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a 5-star review on iTunes and share this with somebody who you know who might be looking for more consciousness in their life. You can visit me on shannon-o'hara.com or talktotheentities.com. And to learn more about the amazing tools of Access Consciousness, you can visit accessconsciousness.com and be sure to subscribe to the podcast.